Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to have on Colin Padget of Founders Metals. If you're like me, you have a tendency to get nervous chasing exciting stories that have already re-rated multiples of where they started. The upside to this strategy is that you don't get caught in a rug pull and buy the top of an overhyped story. But the downside is that you also miss out on the truly massive winners. So the tricky part then is being able to identify which stories have already been told and which are just getting started. And I don't pretend to know with 100% confidence the difference, but some cases are more obvious than others. And if you ask me, one of those stories that is just going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger with time is Founders Metals. They released just absolutely incredible drill results on, it seems that like trains run on time, regular basis for their Antino gold project in Suriname. So joining me today, then, as I said, is CEO Colin Padget. This is going to be my introductory long-form deep dive. So it's going to be a bit lengthier. So of course, as always, make sure to use the timestamps that I provide with notes, so you can jump around if you don't have an uninterrupted hour to sit down and listen to the whole thing. Before I turn it over to Colin, though, please remember all standard disclaimers apply. I'll be asking Colin forward-looking questions. He'll be providing forward-looking statements. Blue sky scenarios rather will be involved. So don't hold us against us in that regard. Otherwise, Colin, welcome. Thanks for being on the show today. And how are you?
Doing fine. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to this one. Like I said, this is an exciting one. So, classic statement I always ask people to start with is just your typical elevator pitch, right? Just frame the conversation for us so that as we kind of get into the weeds a bit and then kind of get some elbow room going, people can understand what they're dealing with.
Sure. I guess like the high level overview is Founders Metals is a Canadian junior exploration company. Our flagship asset is the Antino Gold Project. We're in southeastern Suriname, which sits right in the middle of the heart of the Guyana Shield, and that's a really important jurisdiction. Our project aside, even there's a lot of potential for that area. It's a very unexplored area in many cases. And I think there's going to be a lot of really big projects come out of there over the next 5, 10, 15 years. Bringing our project into it, I think our project will be one of those really big things. And, we've had a lot of success last year with some excellent drill results. Started out this year pretty strong as well. And as you mentioned, 2 to 3 week timelines on drill results. And, I've been pretty proud of that part because we're able to bring people along for the ride as we, step by step grow this thing. And there's still a lot of exploration out and away from the main things we've been working. So I think 24 is going to give us an opportunity to dig into some of those as well, and just really kind of build this thing even more.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. Yeah, this, like I say, I really do believe this is one of those stories where if you're just tuning into it, you'll see that it's re-rated very healthily since last summer. But I mean, I'm buying right now, so I think that the best is yet to come, certainly for Founders. So, Colin, I just chatted with another younger CEO, just a young gun like me. So I might just ask you, do you just want to go over your work experience, maybe discoveries that you've been involved with in the past because you are a geologist, and maybe kind of rounding with the conversation, just discuss how you came to be CEO of Founders, which is obviously such a hot company right now.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, education background. I actually started in the business side. I did a business degree from Memorial University in Newfoundland. Then worked in commercial retail banking for a little bit, and decided that that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, and I always liked the geology side of things. So went back to school, did undergrad in geology, then at the University of New Brunswick, and then graduate school, University of Calgary. All the while, I worked quite a lot. Initially with geologic survey in the Yukon, bedrock mapping, field work, that sort of thing, and then moved from the kind of public, mapping, field work standpoint more into, working for companies, working on the industry side of things. Did some, most recently, Thesis Gold's ranch project, and the lawyers project as well. I was pretty heavily involved with that from fairly early on, and it was from that project that I moved into my role now with Founders. As far as how I came on board as CEO, I really, I basically came with the project, I suppose. I was initially introduced to the guys at Aurea, who are looking to sell their option on Antino, and I kind of went through that whole process of negotiating that transaction and doing the due diligence work, putting it all together, and um, in doing so, I kind of came with the project and came on as CEO at that time um, when things got rolling. So it's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
for me that's been the great thing is it provides a continuity that you don't always get. I think a lot of CEOs you come into a project that exists, but being able to see it right from day one, like from the first time anyone in our group had really talked about or even heard of the Antino project, it's nice to have come all the way.
Hmm. Yeah, it's something about institutional memory, right? And then being there, like you say, from day one just provides that ease of context and understanding. So why don't we
Yeah.
talk about, you talked about your acquisition from Aurea. I mean, I find this so curious because the initial, so you acquired an option to own up to earn up to 75% of Antino. You got it for $500,000 and 1,000,000 shares.
Right.
Honestly, obviously that's chump change for what this looks like it's turning into. Can you just tell the origin story? I mean, was this a distressed asset, or how did it come to be that founders came to possess that 75% path?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess like the story for us coming or getting connected with it was just a colleague in our broader group introduced me to all the guys at Aurea, and their flagship asset is not or was not Antino. It's the Montagne d'Or project in French Guyana, which is a nearly 5 million ounce gold deposit, so pretty significant main asset. They, however, there were some issues I think with Russian sanctions and um, legal battles with the French government. So just some complications there, I think, that led to them wanting to or needing to kind of let go of some of their other assets. They had been working this, and the CEO at the time, Roch Lefrancois, he really, really likes this project. And one of the basically how it went is they had put quite a lot of time and work into developing this as their next exploration target. They flew brand new LiDAR survey. They resampled a lot of the historic core. They had a structural geologist come in and do a mapping project in all of the new pits. Did a lot of relogging of some of the historic stuff. They put a lot of time in and spent quite a few dollars as well. And so for us, it was had scale. It had that kind of turnkey sort of feel to it, so it was really appealing. But the property itself is actually owned by a Surinamese family or group. Um, they're the concession owners, and they're who the original option agreement was with between it was Aurea and them, and then we came in and acquired the option from Aurea as an assignment. So we paid Aurea. They're kind of now out or separate from the story, and it's now just us dealing with the folks in Suriname.
Sure. No, thank you. And so I've tasked Colin here I've created a little PowerPoint or slideshow for this conversation. And so actually, Colin, this is one I rearranged on you, so on the fly here. Do you mind? It'll be down near the bottom, but there is I just want to talk about your 75%, the
Sure.
path to ownership here. If you scroll down there, because I just want to
Yeah.
ask. I mean, so yeah, this is a kind of a classic question that people ask, right? I mean, you're on route to 51%. Looks like there's that path to 75%. And so, I mean, you can see that it's still, in terms of cash and shares, it's not too bad, right? And obviously, the work commitments I mean, that's just the price of success, right? And there's a requirement to get some technical reports published as well. But do you mind just to discuss? I think the question that people, I know you've been asked this before, and I want to kind of hear it from the horse's mouth. But is there a path to 100% ownership? I mean, are there conversations ongoing? What does that look like right now?
I'd say there's conversations ongoing. The reality is that 25%, that's remaining, under the structure here is held by, that group in Suriname, and they've actually been excellent partners in country and have helped immensely with the logistics side of things and just our ability to do everything that we've done as quickly as we've done. I think we can attribute some of that success to their help on the ground. So I just put that out there because I think it's important having these kind of very solid partners makes a big difference. But the way it's structured right now is after stage two of the option, it actually goes to a proportional spend joint venture agreement. And so under that, if they aren't contributing, they can be diluted down to 10%. So we, you know, depending on whether they're, are able to or want to contribute, proportionally at that point in time, um, that's going to dictate whether or not we take it to 90, I guess, on our end. So,
Okay.
uh, yeah.
No, that's good to know. Actually, I mean, I think that like you say, not just a passive partner who operates as a bit of a millstone, but provides value on their own right. I mean,
Yeah.
theoretically, in a world where we're taking this construction decision, the door is open to buying them out, or is this something that you think they would probably want to carry to production?
No, there's that option is there, and we've had discussions with them. They're definitely open to that. There's also a kind of a tag along clause associated with this. So if we were to get into a scenario where we're being bought out, they effectively can't stand in the way of that transaction. Would come along with us, come along for the ride, so to speak. So yeah, so we don't have any concerns that way, and uh, they're pretty switched on and pretty on board with everything that we've been doing and what our plans are too. So yeah, it's good that way. I think
Yeah,
quite good.
yeah, good to have. Yeah, like you say, in country partners that kind of know who to talk to and where to go. Right? No, that's yeah, good. Thank you. And so, I mean, just kind of balance around here, just to try to get some basic content out for people. Right? Part of the reason why I like this, I mean, it's super cheap to explore. Right? $160 per meter. You own your own drill rigs, which is kind of neat, right? That's not necessarily a common thing that you see. Maybe a question I have, can you drill 12 months a year, or does the rainy season interrupt things for a period of time down there?
No, we can drill 12 months a year. The rainy season, what it does is it means we change our strategy a little bit. So bigger, longer moves. We tend to try to have those happen when things are a bit drier. We also do our best, particularly at Froyo, where now there is opportunity to do some more infill type drilling from some of the pads, or at least make sure we're getting the density that we need for a future upcoming resource. So we'll try to drill more from a single pad. Just be efficient that way in terms of limiting moves, because overall it's the rainy season. So if there's mud and machinery, the less big moving you do, the better. That said, I mean, we started drilling last year in the peak of the rainy season. It was the end of June that we got rolling, and we didn't have any difficulty, achieving more than we even thought in terms of drill production. So um, year-round drilling.
Yeah, awesome. No, great. Another advantage, eh? So maybe I might cue you up to head back up to the top here, if you don't mind,
Mhm.
Colin. I wanted to discuss when we were kind of brainstorming in advance here, we kind of thought maybe having a conversation on its own about Suriname as a jurisdiction, because I'm going to guess that for a lot of people, it's not high on our radar in terms of known commodities. But I just have some questions around here just for this conversation as well. Maybe we can say maybe we'll go back and have a deep dive on that later. But I mean, so again, just to set this up, I mean, physical infrastructure, it is remote, but it is remarkably accessible, right? This is one of the things I looked at right away when I knew where your location was. I mean, there's no highways. They're all kind of dedicated to the coastline because you're pretty deep in the Amazon there. But within your property, a very established road system. You've got a river that runs right by the property, so you can barge in. Airports with commercial flights accessible, hour flight away from cities, right? So it's not not something to worry too much about from that perspective. I guess maybe
Yeah.
in terms of questions I have, you can obviously, if you want to touch on that physical infrastructure advantages, please feel free. But I was going to ask you more about, I guess, human infrastructure, right? I mean, what is Suriname's background as a mining jurisdiction? I mean, do you have ready access to skilled or unskilled labor? Do you have to import those things? What's that sort of deal like?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll touch on the infrastructure piece just quickly, just so people have a sense of how things work for us. The barge piece is a big part of our access, and it's a big part of any future development story, I think, as well. On the property, there is heavy equipment, things up to 40-ton trucks and 320 excavators, D6, D8 dozers, that kind of thing. And that's all able to be brought up on a barge to the property. So future development, that sort of equipment is all movable. Um, but it's coming from here in Albina and then coming all the way up the river there. It's about a day and a half on the barge. That's how our drills came in. Um, Also, the road network here does. There's some kind of forest roads and things that do extend a bit further south of the Brokopondo, the main the reservoir for the hydroelectric here. So potentially there's an opportunity for some road building down the road if if there's a scale piece that warrants that, and works something out or something's worked out with the government in Suriname. Um, in terms of you know the country and its history and access to skilled labor, really gold mining, both at the small scale and the larger industrial scale, with the two mines in the country, Newmont's Marion mine, and then now Zijin has the Rosebell mine. So there's a long history of gold mining. The alluvial small scale artisanal mining that's been going on, since into the 1800s. Um, Over quite a large areas, particularly along that kind of main river here, at least on the eastern side. But just having that industrial, mining there for so long as well, it means that you know, there's, an education system that goes along with that, and kind of, feeding the demand that those big operations have. And yeah, we certainly see the benefit of that in the people that we're able to hire. Um, for example, like our drilling crews are pretty much exclusively locals. We have a Canadian drill foreman down there doing training effectively and managing overall, but our crews are exclusively Surinamese, and these are guys who have drilling experience, and have come on board. So we're not starting from scratch. It's very good that way.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And then I guess the same thing in terms of the mining jurisdiction, pardon me, aspect. In terms of assays, this is another nice thing, is a pretty quick turnaround. But can you just explain where do you ship them off to, and then your typical turnaround time?
Yeah, so in Paramaribo, so our samples go out from camp. So main airstrip at camp, about an hour flight to Paramaribo, and then there's actually a Bureau Veritas certified lab called Fee Lab that operates there. But 1,000 sample per day, capacity. Right now, they're under that, and we're kind of priority, I guess, clients at this point. And we have a negotiated 2-week turnaround time with them. And in some cases, I mean, we've seen samples come back as quickly as 3 days. That's not the norm, but that's pretty wild, in its own right. But on the sample note, the thing that's really great, it's great from a keeping everyone informed standpoint and getting news out regularly and all of that. But on the ground, from a technical standpoint, it's been really, really helpful. Particularly with, we were talking about the rainy season, being efficient with your drilling and moves and that sort of thing. I mean, if we're drilling 3 or 4 holes on a pad, we have had scenarios where we've gotten the assays back for hole 1 while we're on hole 3. And that's, you can't beat that. You're, reducing your remobilization costs if it's something that you find and want to re-drill or drill more of. Yeah, makes a big difference. Same with ground exploration and sampling, soil geochemistry, anything like that. You're getting that information in as close to real time as you can without having your own lab facilities right on site, and it means that you can modify grids, you can change things on the fly to accommodate that information.
Yeah, and that's exactly where, obviously as a retail investor, it's nice to get timely results and not have to wait 6 months in its last season's campaign, kind of thing. But,
Yeah.
but actually, as an explorer, having that almost real time information to inform where you go next and how to conduct your exploration strikes these, a huge advantage, right?
Yeah.
What about just transitioning again, kind of shifting gears a bit? So I can understand. Obviously it's clear there's always a degree of resistance to mining, especially in what you might consider to be ecologically sensitive areas, right? So just in terms of community support, right? I kind of want give you an opportunity to discuss both the both sides of the coin, so to speak, right? In terms of support, but also potential reluctance. I mean, but to start out with, has there been any protests or reluctance to your project? And I guess maybe also, so kind of the follow up to that is, can you explain maybe some community outreach efforts that you have ongoing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to the first question, no, there's not been any opposition or any protests or anything like that. People have been, very supportive of it, of having us out there, particularly because it is, quite a ways into the interior, and having that kind of the recognition that comes from, especially a successful project like ours, it makes a big difference to the area. I mean, people are proud to live out there, and seeing that attention come to the interior, it's very important to the people out there. So in terms of outreach and what we're doing right now, or just recently, we've met with one of the local Luku groups. So we've just kind of initiating those relationships between founders and those groups. But we're also coming into a very long-standing positive relationship that, again, the concession owners have with the various peoples who live along the river, that sort of thing, and that helps. I mean, a lot of our employment, we source as much as we can, out of the local communities. We certainly apply a sort of Suriname first employment policy where we can, and I think as we continue forward, those sorts of employment policies, just bringing new infrastructure to the area, all of that definitely helps kind of the broader population.
Absolutely. It becomes almost the risk reward of mining as a local stakeholder. And if you're able to get that buy-in and understanding that this is an opportunity for, economic revolution, right? Or rejuvenation for these communities, that's easy buy-in, right?
Yeah.
And what about taxation and royalties? I mean, obviously this is looking forward to a positive construction decision and first pour, et cetera. But can you just kind of very briefly go over Suriname's taxation and royalty schemes?
Yeah. So, I mean, at present for the industrial scale mining, basically there's the two projects. They both have been their royalty schemes, or any sort of government stake or ownership. Those have been negotiated as individual items. There's so moving to that stage of things, you're in talks with the government, understanding how and what sort of infrastructure and capital improvement piece they are able to provide, and it's a bit of a back and forth that way. And so the numbers wind up are being different for different projects because there's a different level of involvement that the government can take. But yeah, that's the main piece. On the small scale mining, a lot of the gold is brought to Paramaribo and then sold to registered gold sellers, and then there's a royalty that's taken at that point. That's including the fees, I think is on the order of 6 or 7% for the smelting fees, and the royalty is something less than that.
So pretty competitive. And
Yeah,
so one last question here. I read that you do have an exploitation permit in place already. Can you just maybe provide some color and context there? What is it? Does it cover your entire concession, and maybe explain what that allows you to do?
sure. Yeah. So our concession here, so this is the big outline on this map, is actually two contiguous concessions that are 10,000 hectares each. They are both exploitation concessions. And what exploitation means, really, it's that there's active mining going on the property, and that's the alluvial small scale mining that I think we've talked about before. But that's going on. It's providing economic benefit to the region, to the government, and then there's royalties, that sort of thing, that are being paid, and reports are being made on a regular basis to the government. What it provides founders, as we earn into this property, it provides us the opportunity to potentially do some small scale mining or tailings processing of our own that would fall under those permits or those existing permits, and that's a big deal. But additionally, for our exploration work, exploitation covers all of what we need to do, the exploration type work we want to do. So we're not in need of separate or additional permits for more drilling or that sort of thing, which is good. It means we're not faced with being held up waiting for those sorts of things, as can be the case in some other jurisdictions. We can just kind of continue forward. Um, yeah, the stage before exploitation is exploration permits. Those can be much larger areas, and typically they're usually good for about 3 years, where you're given a window of time to prove that there's something economic there, that could be mined or could convert them or have them converted to exploitation. Yeah.
So maybe the kind of the crux of my follow up. I mean, do you have permits in place to get to full scale production, or does this, or is there kind of an upper limit in terms of tons per day that this exploitation permit provides?
There's no specific tons per day criteria. It's more if you want to, um, if you're going into large scale industrial production, the next level of permitting for that type of work is going to require that interaction with the government proper, where you're negotiating, what that relationship looks like, and so that's really the next step. So commercial scale production, I mean, the definition of that is tricky. I mean, is that a Newmont size operation, or is it a 400 or 500 ton per day alluvial processing plant? And the first one means you need to have those conversations with the government, and the second one is something that you're already permitted for. So yeah.
No, excellent. So, I mean, you mentioned the tailings, and I want to talk about that because that's a pretty interesting kind of side piece to this conversation. But I'll put a pin in that for now because I do want to discussing kind of community relations, et cetera. The artisanal miners, as you said, I mean, 1881, I think the discovery was by a couple of French guys in the 1880s. So this is hardly a new story, right? And so there is a very active series of projects. I mean, I think that there's 16 small pits, I think, on your Upper Antino property or project, pardon me. I guess maybe the first question is, how many different alluvial or artisanal kind of mining projects are actually currently active on your property right now?
Yeah, on the property, there's active operations in three areas basically. So at Upper Antino, there's some people that have been working for quite a long time at Donut. Actually, it kind of feeds into the tailings conversation because it's what's producing those tails, and then some work around the Ginger Eclair area. So that's a smaller operation, and then probably the biggest operation right now on the property is at Boise, kind of right in the center of things. So, and those are all miners they're contract miners to the concession owners um, right now.
Okay, all right. So that makes sense to me because yeah, I guess you can see where probably I'm going with this. But I mean, what is your relationship with them? I mean, obviously, I guess it's a contractor that does change things here. It's not kind of a rogue sort of gray
No,
area legally. But yeah, what's your relationship with them right now?
our relationship's very good. So since we arrived, we've made it we've made it a point to be in as much communication as we can with the people on the ground so that they understand what our goals are long term, um, and so that we can work with them. And we do. They're the ones out there that have heavy equipment at the moment. They're the ones that have the very skilled operators of that equipment. Also for some construction type work, those sorts of things. We have on numerous occasions hired kind of all the different parties for various things to help us with on the exploration side. So the relationship is very positive, and the fact that they are contract miners to the concession owners, that's an important distinction because having them there, and one group's been there, a couple of groups actually, for over 20 years almost, 15, 20 years, and it lends a stability to the property that you don't necessarily see in some of the other concessions out there in the Guyana Shield, in terms of kind of the illegal mining that I think you're alluding to.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was going with this, and you kind of solved that question. Is it this that there's always that risk of, I mean, these people naturally are going to feel a degree of possession over, referencing more so the illegal mining, right? The feeling of possession of these areas because it is their backyard or it is their home, and just that question around how continue to maintain a positive relation so that they will vacate and not cause a fuss. But I mean, if they're under contract with the current concession owners, and that kind of reduces that risk significantly. So
It does.
that'll, go ahead. There you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's an opportunity there as well, where these are people that are on the ground. They own heavy equipment. They know the ground quite well, and I think there's an opportunity for a company like Founders, particularly if we're thinking of things like mining or processing tailings, or if we wanted to do some alluvial mining of our own. There's certainly opportunity to engage and employ those people to work for us as well, and you're then saving a lot of capital expenditure in terms of bringing equipment in from Paramaribo, and it would lend a certain level of stability as well. Um, artisanal mining, I think, is pretty up and down as far as success and all of that goes. If you lose the line, it it can be slow for a while they're trying to find the next place where there's gold to get out of the ground. So some work or some long-term employment from things that we might put together in the future, I think, is an appealing or an attractive option.
Yeah, the transition will smooth over any potential concerns anyway. That's that's good information I wasn't aware of. Thank you. And I mean, serves as a decent transition here. I mean, do we want to talk about, or I would like to talk about rather, just historic exploration and production? Like I say, we'll set aside production for just a moment here. And again, I'll just kind of set the table for people. 32,000 meters have been drilled historically. I think it's 60-40 diamond versus RC.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe the question I have as an immediate follow-up to that comment is, because like you mentioned yourself, it's sort of that turnkey aspect to this. It's very well understood, lots of above and below ground exploration. Maybe just to kind of to get to the point here is how far away, 2023 has been remarkable for Founders, right? And so many just remarkably positive results. But I mean, how much of your 10,000, I believe 10,000 meters is the number you got into the ground in 2023. And you can correct me as you need to there, but how much of that kind of is confirming historical work, kind of twinning holes, if that happened, I guess, and as a side question, but versus how much of that actually did expand through, new discoveries, new areas?
Sure. Well, all of the drilling that we did was at Upper Antino. I guess in 2023, over 90% of it was at Froyo. Once we started hitting what we were hitting, it was be hard to move away from that in terms of exploration targets. But we did get some drill holes or a couple of them into Donut as well, which is one of the more intrusion hosted type targets. Bit of a separate thing from Froyo towards the end of the year. And we're now kind of keeping that split right now, with one drill staying at Froyo and going from there. In terms of the historical data piece and turnkey, I mean, the big part of the turnkey comment is that, Aurea, before us coming into it, they had, compiled a lot of the historic database work. They had reprocessed some of the 1997 regional geophysics, things like that had already been done, and those are things that take time, and cut that timeline down for us. Being able to get things rolling and put together some ideas for targeting new stuff. That said, I mean, well, first comment is in terms of twinning, we never actually twinned any holes directly. Certainly started out as confirmation drilling. The historic hole at Upper Antino and Froyo was 62 meters at 10 grams. I mean, it's hard not to want to see what's going on there. And while we did have I do have quite a bit of historic core. Some of the mineralized intervals either were missing or they had low recovery. And so particularly around that area, we had some questions that we wanted to answer. So we started right there, drilled some stuff that, just right into the meat of that, 62 of 10, and it had some great hits. But we were also, drilling deeper, pretty much right out of the gate. By hole 5 and 6, we were drilling deeper than had been drilled before in those areas. So extending things to depth in the areas where mineralization was kind of known. And then we moved initially to the south. And I wonder if do we have a long section in here? I think I saw one. Maybe that's a easier. Yeah. So you can see it, this faded thing here is that's that 62 meters of 10. And so, we started up early on drilling just right here beside it effectively. And then from that, we moved to the south and just kept drilling deeper, I guess, and hit some really fantastic and really broad intervals of mineralization down here. And this is, we're getting down to 140, 150 meters of depth. And there were a few hits. I mean, that was the thing with the historic data, and what is always or still kind of puzzles us about it, especially with the amount of drilling we have of our own now at this point, is that there was. I mean, I think even in his introduction to the talk at Metals Investor Forum, Eric Coffin mentioned that when he first reviewed this, it kind of looked a little spotty. Didn't know if it would hold together, and he wasn't wrong. But with our drilling, following up on it and doing this kind of incremental step outs, yeah, it has held together. And I don't know if it's a case of just the positioning of the drill collars, so maybe the exact XY location we have isn't right for the historic stuff, but we can't go back and find out what the right stuff would be now. Or there was definitely reports of poor or low recovery in some of the holes, some lost holes, that sort of thing. So there could be a question of drilling, but yeah, it's confirmation, but then really growth, I think, all along. Except for the first kind of couple, and even where we drilled some stuff where there were some hits, we wound up hitting bigger, broader, higher grade stuff. What was exciting for us, because it was completely in a new territory, was we moved into the Froyo Ginger Gap or connector here. And the reason that hadn't really been touched historically was there was a bit of a wet spot or low area, but we had some material from some of the artisanal mining that we could build a pad out of it, and we did so, and those are some of the highest grade hits on the to date or on the property, 400 almost 435 grams per ton in one sample. So that's been phenomenal. And then after that, it was actually within that area basically before we moved. We're looking to move up the hill. That was when we did our first big step back, and yeah, that's the right one, I think. Actually, our first big step backs were back here, basically to come underneath and to hit this deeper down, and that's when we started hitting the stuff in the parallel zone, or up higher in the drill string that we would have expected it. And so, yeah, it's just kind of built out like that. And when we think about buying our own drills and all of that, one of the things that's really helped us has been the fact we had cheap drill beaters. If we kind of initially gone with the third party drilling company, we would have, with the budget that we had coming into this, we'd been pretty restricted in terms of overall meters for a program, and we probably would have had to make different decisions in terms of spacing and growing things and testing other targets than we had to, because we had such cheap meters and could do so much with so little. So it's, I don't know, been a number of things all kind of come together to get to where it is.
Yeah, find success, right? And you're right that having the meterage that you need to find that discovery is so important, right? I mean, those little 2,000 or 3,000 meters drill campaigns, there's just not much room for error there, right? And so, question I have, and this kind of, like you say, kind of dovetails nicely here. I mean, there's, if my counting is correct, there's been 5 different operators that have had their names stamped onto this project since 2006, and so a decent number of people have had a go at this, and as we've explained, I mean, now almost 150 years of history on this land. So the question that I want to pose to you next is kind of a classic one these days, right? But I mean, and this might take a little bit of a tangent here, so give me a second. But what are you doing differently? I mean, obviously you're fighting, frankly, I guess we would call it stunning, remarkable success, right? I mean, what are your approach then? Obviously, what are you doing differently to achieve that? You're not doing kind of the classic modern exploration example of going 600 meters down versus 200. This is all, eminently open pittable, 150 meters deep, right? Lots of exceptional grades, very close to surface. And so, I don't want you to, is this a matter of, as you just kind of alluded to, having the budget to properly explore this potentially for the first time? Or maybe this is an opportunity for us to get into the weeds a little bit in terms of your geological model. But I mean, are you coming out as with a fresh perspective in terms of your exploration thesis?
Yeah, no, definitely get that question quite a bit. I mean, people want to know, yeah, what are you doing differently? I mean, like there's a few things. The one I usually talk about first is the fact that even up until 2008, this was kind of more or less undisturbed ground, and so there wasn't that 3D view that we get even from day one stepping on this property. We have now artisanal pits from that gap between 2008 to and kind of 2014 2015 timeframe for mining there. um, we can walk up to, and the main structure that we did all the drilling in 23 at Froyo, you can walk up to and touch that, and you can measure it, you can sample it. We grab samples over 50 grams per ton along that trend, and that's a big deal. So in terms of just orientation and just being able to do a lot of structural measurements and get data that wouldn't have been available, we have that, and that's pretty simplistic, but it's a really important piece of it. And if you think about that exploration previously, then they're building drill pads in the jungle, and they're really only getting the information that's coming out in the core, and so it's a bit harder to visualize and put things together. After that, though, like a couple of big things that have helped us. First is the LiDAR data. LiDAR in these sort of jungle terrains is just immeasurably beneficial to an exploration program. You see through the canopy, you can, see kind of the broader scale structures, understand kind of a bit more of what's going on. You can even, once you get a handle on what rocks do what or look like what, in terms of topography, you can get a sense of just the overall geology too from some of that, or it just helps to piece that bigger picture together. And in geology, everything's about scale. So if you start to understand the bigger picture, you can start applying that understanding to a smaller kind of deposit or outcrop or you know uh, drilling scale. Um, and then after the lidar, I mean, we did ground magnetics and IP. Without going into all the details, well, I guess we can. But in terms of the IP data, this is one I've talked to quite a bit about, but we were able to learn a lot about what was going on there from the IP in particular. And I'll admit, our VPX convinced me that this is what we should do, because I'm not historically a huge believer in IP, or it works when it wants to. It's kind of how I've always felt about it. But it's just, it became so difficult you couldn't argue with the results. You know, just being able to see, things like this M fold here, that sort of structure to get that information even out of IP is fantastic. And then after that, it was just how well the chargeability. I know this is probably a bit small for viewers, but how well the chargeability lined up with those high grade historic auger samples, and those were all taken before there was a pit there. So you get to kind of see what that signature looks like, and then after that, learning more and more about the structure. And that's another thing I would say is different is, we have, well, pretty much since the start on the ground, we've had Vincent Combs working for us as kind of a chief geologist on the ground there, and he's did his PhD on the Yao deposit, which is a 1.7 million ounce gold deposit, a little over 2 gram average. That's 10 kilometers away from us. Published 2 papers on that in 2022. So there's not too many people out there that would have a better background to kind of hit the ground running and be able to put the ideas together. But one of the big things that he pulled out of the information was, and in large part from some of this IP work, was that there is a northeast component, and that northeast orientation things. It's that's the orientation that he was seeing at the Yao deposit, and then here we see it as actually you see where these bends are. Well, those bends, those are this, that orientation is associated with this kind of final or last stage of brittle deformation. And that stage of deformation is linked to the highest grade mineralization, the highest grade gold that we've encountered. And it was linked to the Yao deposit. And we were able to really pick out the orientations of that sort of thing from this IP data and his work. So I don't know, maybe I got a little too into that, but yeah, I think those are the big things that I've separated us from the last guys, and it's some of it is just the fact that this industry is iterative. there's usually a number of people, and it's having that historical data and being able to build on it, that eventually leads to understanding it, particularly in these structurally hosted or structurally controlled type deposits, but being able to understand it at a level that then allows you to drill and target your drilling effectively to grow it. And
No.
I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, excellent. And I think it's Robert Friedland who has the kind of the quippy, the overnight success, 30 years in the making, or sort of approach to
Yeah,
things, right? Yeah.
that's
No.
exactly right.
Yeah, right. And so I found it interesting. I mean, yeah, so you are benefiting from modern geophysical data, right? That those new data layers that have been acquired. But I also think it's interesting, kind of not something I necessarily thought about, but having those alluvial miners actually kind of they operate as a proof of concept that they, like as you said, what matches your data, you can actually see what's in the ground, and in addition to that, you're actually in the ground, literally being able to pick out grab samples from these areas. No, thank you.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And so again, kind of decent transition here. Historical production, 530 ounces of gold have been mined historically. I guess first question, any notion, can you give us a decent grasp of how much of that is in the last 15, 20 years of more modern alluvial mining versus, the historical, from 1880 to 1930 sort of thing?
Yeah, I think the majority or over half of that would be in the last kind of 15, 20-year time frame. Yeah, there's been, and I think the records as well are also, I think, a lot tighter over that period of time. The further back you go, you're relying on just single reports, whereas we have the various reports, the quarterly and annual things that go into the government on production off of the property, and the taxes that go along with that. So a lot of confidence in a lot of different data points pointing to that amount of gold that's come off the property. That said, I mean, there's certainly gold that's unreported that would have come off of it over its 130, 140 year history, no question. So the 500,000 ounces is really just a starting point, and what we can really put our finger on. But I'm sure it's a much larger number, and that was another one of those scale type pieces that got us really interested from the beginning, because the alluvial mining is typically dealing with recovery on the order of 20 to 30%. And so the great thing about that 500,000 ounce number is when you think about those sorts of recoveries, you're actually looking at 2 million plus ounces of gold that have been moved. It hasn't all left. A lot of it's still there in the tailings, and as you said, we'll talk about that later, but certainly our tailings results point to that. So just seeing that, you're already talking a multi-million ounce gold deposit in terms of that historical production. And yeah, it speaks to a pretty massive gold system. And even, this is maybe a bit of a tangent, but in terms of like alluvial footprint, yeah, in this one, a lot of big discoveries in these sorts of jungle terrains come out of areas where there has been a long history of historical mining, and the big thing that people are looking for are these alluvial footprints. So all of the workings in and around Boise, in and around Lower Antino, Upper Antino, and then Yao, the deposit I mentioned, is just over here, but you can see the alluvial workings around that, and then there's workings to the north of us as well in Benstorp. So yeah, it's a
Yeah, they're your pathfinders. They're kind of a pathfinder. It's not so much a pathfinder element, but a pathfinder human, I guess. Right? No, it's
yeah.
interesting. So I mean, maybe let's talk about the tailings now. Right? You kind of brought it back up, and so I mean, again, I'm going to guess this is a conversation you have sometimes, but to me, it seems so tantalizing. Gravity separation, 25, 35% recovery. I think, and I'm not sure about that from your MD&A or from your technical report, but like you said, I mean, there's 1.5 million ounces of gold in waste piles that are just kind of waiting for somebody with a budget to process them. And so,
Yeah.
in one hand you have that, and the other hand you have this exploitation permit that theoretically allows you to mine these tailings. And so maybe this is a little untraditional, but I mean, to me, as kind of just a, I can say full recognition of me being an armchair quarterback here or backseat driver, but is there a path to funding this project moving forward by trying to get this into production a little bit? Or is that maybe an unnecessary distraction from the core prize of exploration? Or do you just want to kind of explain your thoughts and reasoning on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we've had the tailings thing and kind of on the back burner a little bit last year. Really, we just didn't want to distract from the exploration conversation, nor from our focus on the exploration. But as we did this work, and as we continue to do work on the tailings at Upper Antino, and soon start doing some sampling down in the Boise area as well, where the vast majority of the tailings on the property are. It really does open that conversation of, okay, well, there's enough of it here. The timelines to actually putting something like this in production can be relatively short, on the order of within a year kind of thing. And it looks like there's stuff here to process and to generate revenue, and potentially enough revenue that you're in a place where, with the drilling costs that we have, that you could do a considerable amount of drilling, considerable amount of exploration work without needing to go back to the market and finance that way. So it becomes more and more attractive to move towards this kind of non-dilutive exploration and growth, and it adds a certain level of scarcity to the founders' shares as well, which would be a good thing for investors. I think our debate right now, not debate, but we're still putting some of the information together in terms of some preliminary metallurgical work and some additional sampling to get a better handle on overall grades, consistency, all that sort of thing, is really what are the options. And the options really are that founders decides that it wants to do some mining as well. Um, we acquire the equipment to do so, and then put things into production, hire our own crews, and that sort of thing. That's one option. The other one would be that we partner with a third party operator, and then we would have some sort of gross royalty or offtake agreement, or something along those lines. And yeah, the final numbers I think will really dictate whether there's enough value there to offset kind of the you know I would say at least partial distraction from the exploration, and the risk to do it ourselves, or do we remove that risk entirely by having someone come in with their own capital, and then we just take a cash flow piece from it. So that's where we're at with it, but it's very much on the radar and something that we're working on.
Interesting. Yeah, just being a silent partner to that. Yeah, interesting. So is that a 2024 decision, do you think? Is that something that Mark will learn about in this calendar year?
Yeah, I would say so.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So why don't we're transitioning to the end of this. And maybe this is where maybe more people more generally start here, but I think that this is, in terms of the flow of the conversation, maybe it makes sense for us to end on this. But why don't we a two-part conversation here? Let's review your 2023 drilling a little bit. This is going to be your classic sales pitch a little bit here, for a couple of questions from me mixed in. And then,
Sure.
your 2024 preview, right? You've got 30,000 meters, that's my understanding, coming up. So you're obviously expanding rapidly. Maybe, I'll maybe ask a couple of questions. And like I said, you feel free to go
Sure.
off on whatever conversation you want. But how many holes then? Quick recap of how many holes that you drilled in 2023.
54 holes, 2023. Yeah, and then, as I said earlier, the bulk of which are at Froyo, with the remainders at Donut. Yeah, I expect with that was just over 10,000 meters, 10,250 for that. Average depth was for ours probably around 175 over the course of the year. We had a couple deeper ones, and just testing stratigraphy and geology things, but yeah, that's where we came in for 2023. For 2024, we do have quite a bit. Well, we've got a budget now, or we've got some cash in the bank, and we do have a plan for kind of upwards towards that 25 to 30,000 meter number. It depends a little bit on how much exploration we do. That said, we also still have a lot of those warrants in the money that are out there, and if they continue to trickle in or come in as they have done, I think that's going to allow us to do even more potentially than what we have slated right now. In terms of plan, this is actually an all right slide to point to things. I mean, one drill is for sure. Right now we have two drills running. One drill for sure is staying in Froyo, and it will do a combination of. Right now we're continuing to test that that in the new parallel zone. But I mean, the deepest part of those holes, as they were originally designed to do, is still testing further to depth the main Froyo shear as well. So one drill staying there, and really, we'll be doing some infill or some of this parallel zone drilling, but then we'll start stepping out to the north. We have holes planned in that direction, and then we will head towards the south, I think, once we've gotten those things filled in, because we've yet to test anything south of the runway or follow up in that direction. The other drill, we will be doing a bit more drilling at Donut. I'm going to put that together, get assays back, and then we'll be releasing information on that. But then the other thing that the drills will be doing at Upper Antino is testing some wildcat, I guess, if you want to call it that, but just some exploration targets that came out of the geophysics work, came out of some sampling and mapping work on the ground that are just really interesting to us. And those are things that haven't seen any drilling historically, haven't been mined or anything like that, but warrant for sure us doing some work on them. And with the drills right there, that's what we're going to do. After that, those wildcat holes are done. We'll at that point be making a decision whether the drill at Donut or kind of the exploration drill heads directly to Boise to start working on drilling down there. There's quite a few targets down there to work on as well. Or depending on success up here, it may stay up here, and we're actively working on bringing a third drill online later on this year, and so that third drill would go to Boise if that was the case. So it's a bit of a balance in working within what we have in terms of capability or capacity on the drilling front, but we're looking to increase that capacity. So
there, you seem to have a bit of a, not to overstate it, but I mean a bit of an embarrassment of riches on targets and potential drill prospects too. I mean, how do you leave Froyo alone when it keeps giving the results that it does, right? And maybe I'm gonna put you on the spot here at the very end of this conversation here, Colin, because again, I'm gonna emphasize here, right, forward-looking statements and blue sky. But if people are wanting to do a little bit of napkin math, specific gravity that they would be using 2.6, 2.7, or do you want to kind of just tell us what's the number?
For the rocks, I think that would be reasonable. For the upper part of it, saprolite specific gravity. So, in the case of the drilling we've done at Froyo, we're anywhere from kind of 15 meters to 35, 40 meters of saprolite before we're into proper rock. And it's a pretty sharp transition from the saprolite or the oxide material into the fresh rock. That would be 1.3 to 1.6 would be a reasonable specific gravity for that interval.
Okay, and then so you can probably infer where I'm going to be heading with this. I might ask you to sneak back over to the picture of the ore body there. Right now, based on your confidence, I'm not asking you to kind of say things that are untenable or kind of unreasonable based on current evidence, but based on current evidence, what are the rough dimensions of the ore body as you understand it?
Well, so it depends on how you look at it, I guess. So right now, what we're talking about in this press release, when we put this information out, looking at the parallel zone, we're talking about the footprint, and the footprint is the projection to surface of all of the hits within our, drill string. And so originally we were looking at, it's about an 80-degree dip, 80, 85 on the main Froyo structure. So 70, 80 meters, kind of that ballpark would have been that projection to surface. Maybe a little bit less, but then now with these hits out and away from that, and initially, you see the ones that we have here, we didn't have as much information on kind of the infill between the two structures, but we, we're putting together that there's another structure out this way. That stretched things out to kind of a 200-meter footprint. That by itself would have been two kind of parallel, sub-parallel structures, but there would have been a gap in the middle. And so if you're doing your napkin math, you'd have to think about that gap. What was glad you have it in here. What was really exciting about hole 45, our last press release, is 6 intervals of grade that are down this pretty much the whole way down, where we're tagging the main structure uh, at depth, but then filling in a huge volume there. And so our continued or upcoming drilling here will have some results in the not too distant future. Is really additionally kind of filling that in and understanding how much of that whole volume has economic grade through it, because that winds up being a very big deal. Having two high grade structures, with material waste material in the middle is very, very different story from having two high grade structures, with you know maybe it's somewhat lower grade, but ore material in between them. Very different scenarios, and my impression is that we're heading towards the latter. That we do have enough that's holding together, to really fill in that gap. There's still quite a bit of drilling to do. You know, won't deny that, but it's pretty exciting because that's one of these things where you know early on people are like asking about the same question you asked. Re-drilling or drilling some of the stuff that was known historically, um, good historic data or otherwise. But this stuff is all new, and it takes it from this one, um, steep dipping, high grade shear or structure to what can be a proper, an impressive volume. Looking at the cross section here, we were originally just dealing with this, and so from a mining standpoint or scenario, you think, a one steep structure, you know, certainly the widths and things are there for some great underground mining. It makes for a fairly high strip if you are, doing trying to mine that in an open pit scenario. But starting to fill in this volume, you know, all through here, that winds up making for a much lower strip ratio, in mining that. So you're getting a lot more volume of ore overall. So it's a big deal. It adds a lot to the deposit, not just an extra parallel zone. Not to underplay that, but it adds a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's one of those things where like you say that where I started with this is that your story is just starting to get told. I mean, and then Froyo in this area, this is just the start. Right? And I think 2024. That's where I guess that's why I started where I did. Is this is not just a one-off, but I mean you have a whole host of targets that look suspiciously similar to what you've accomplished at Upper Antino. It's exciting times. I won't ask you. I was going to ask you about average grade, but I think people. I mean, we've kind of pointed them direction. They can plug in the grams per ton that they want to kind of play with those numbers. But I mean, yeah, things get very exciting in a hurry here. As I hope that people are trying to understand. But so maybe two last kind of grab bait questions. We're at the 1 hour mark here, so maybe I should just try to be efficient here. But philosophically, talking about a JV or sale or the successful endpoint. I mean, I think I say this is really kind of a philosophical discussion. I'm not looking for any sort of specific data or specific comments, but at what point do you call it quits? I mean, at what point do you say that you've achieved what you think you've kind of drilled out the value? You think that there's a fair number. It helps, I guess. Maybe how close are you to that?
Well, that is a tricky question, because I think there's so much potential for the property as a whole, and I think there's any number of things out there that are Froyo-esque or um, other big things are out there on the property. So it's really hard to say, when do you move away from that, or decide that this is the time. But certainly, I mean, our plan will be, to always be moving forward in kind of, regular steps towards, an industrial scale production scenario, but mostly in a, from a de-risking standpoint, for, I mean, I think like every junior, hopefully an eventual, buyout or partnership with a major. Um, yeah, it's hard to put a time or anything like that on that. But I think we're going to move consistently in that direction. I haven't really said it, but we're certainly resource would be our next big milestone. along with some metallurgy work that will be starting here in the next month or so. But resource will be the next big thing. We're looking right now at the pace of things and anticipating first resource, by kind of mid 25 is the timeline we're putting on that right now. And so, I think that will be centered largely on Froyo and what's around it. But depending on, what comes back from Donut, from other things kind of further afield, there's potential for, subsequent resources on those things as well. But yeah, I think we're just keep moving things forward. Always looking to de-risk the project, add ounces as much as we can, and then see, get as much value as we can out of it. Too early, you're not kind of getting the value that I think shareholders want and should get out of a project like this. But yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And so, yeah, maybe just a quick follow-up question. Any NDA signed that have you got people sniffing around already?
Yeah, there's definitely some interest in the property. There's lots of players in the Guyana Shield right now, and I think a lot of people, especially in the mining world or the big miners out there, recognize that it's a jurisdiction where there's going to be new big discoveries. So there's definitely interest.
Fair enough. And I'm not to give you whiplash here on the very last question, but we're going to leap out of Suriname and into New Brunswick. I mean, your Elmtree project, is that officially redundant for you? Is this a kind of an option itself sort of situation, or are you going to actually try to make some progress on that too?
We don't have any plans right now to do any additional exploration work because of the work that we did in 21. Our claims are good there for quite some time. Right now, I think the plan would really be looking for, option sale, JV type work for that property, because this really is 100% of the focus. Yeah, I think that's really the future. There's some opportunity to obtain some value from Elmtree. It's a 300,000 ounce gold deposit, PEA level, and that's before adding in any of the work that we did in 21. So it's an interesting deposit, interesting area of the world. I think the Bathurst mining camp has a pretty bright, positive future on the mineral exploration front. But right now, this is our 100%. So
yeah, how could it not be, right? No, so Colin, I think that's it, Colin. I mean, I guess as I generally do. I mean, any final thoughts to you, or kind of final word to you?
yeah, no, I think we've kind of touched on all of the big things here. I think it's great to get to sit down and chat and kind of in a more casual format go through all of these different conversations, and I'm looking forward to the next ones.
Yeah, excellent. No, and I appreciate your answers, your forthcoming and informed answers. I appreciate that. It makes for a good conversation. So yeah, Colin Padget, Founders Metals. Take a look. Yeah, they're one of those stories that, like I say, the more I read about it, the more I like. So yeah, Colin, thank you for your time, and like you say, until next time, I look forward to it.
Yeah, thanks very much.